Sometimes coming to your senses is where you have a realization that your life needs to be different or things need to be different to how they are. But that moment of realization doesn't necessarily come with the solution in hand. And more than 20 years ago, I had quite a profound insight where that was concerned. And that's the story that I want to share with you today. Welcome to the Coming to Your Senses podcast. My name is Jules Wyman. And literally, as I record this podcast today, I've actually shared this story on social media in written form. And the response has surprised me. Firstly, because I thought most people who were in my sort of social media circle knew this story, and it appears less do than I thought. And secondly, I am deeply touched by the comments that I've received in sharing this story. So I thought, why not share it as my first full-length Coming to Your Senses podcast episode. So trigger warning for those of you who may be triggered by this episode, please do be aware that it is personal content that is talking about a profound, dark, miserable, tense, worrying time that happened in my life. And if what I talk about in this episode does bring things to the surface for you, then please do make sure that you either reach out to me directly or seek the appropriate support in order to be able to help you from wherever you are right now, because you're never alone. And there are, especially even more so now, I think there are people that can help us all with whatever support that we need. So I just wanted to say that up front. And to give you the context, I was in my late 20s, so more than 20 years ago now. And I had grown up and spent this became really intense for me in my teenage years of really recognizing and believing the thinking that told me that I was stupid, ugly, useless, worthless, unlovable, and that my life really was all about I had to find those people that really like me and even hang on to anyone who showed me any kind of like or love. And I'm sure you can imagine that led me into some very interesting circumstances. And I'm really quite grateful that social media wasn't around at that point, because I think I would have been one of those teenagers that fell down that black hole seeking external validation quite intensely. So I wouldn't have been able to articulate it the way that I'm articulating it now, because I didn't have the awareness of it back then. I just knew that I had to prove to everybody else that I was likable. I didn't realize that was coming really from an intense internal dislike, and also desperately wanted to be loved. And that led me into some very longer term relationships that nothing against the other person, but I shouldn't have been in the relationships. I stayed in them way too long, and they probably are meant to have been very fleeting moments in my life, and they were quite long. And one particular relationship in my late 20s, I was really looking for I think I was thinking that at this point in my life I would be close to finding the one. And I wasn't necessarily being focused on that I desperately wanted to get married and have children. That wasn't really at the forefront of my mind. The forefront of my mind really was having a man in my life that absolutely doted on me and loved me. The irony was that I didn't dote on me. I didn't love me. And in fact, most if not all of the behaviors that I was doing were actually quite destructive. So I was heavily into alcohol. I drank pretty much every day. I would say 4, if not 5 times out of the week, I was very drunk. I was also eating very poorly. I would say that at least 2, if not more times a day, I would be eating chocolate bars. I'm not sure very much of the green stuff, but went past it came into my digestive system. And junk food, your fast food, McDonald's and Burger Kings, etc., were very often lunch and dinner. And so I wasn't particularly in a healthy state at all. If only I knew back then what I know now about the implications of that, but that's for another episode. And I was also taking drugs of varying calibers at various points and in various intensities. And so I was not in a great space at all. What I hadn't realized were those fleeting moments of happiness, be that in the like from somebody else or the perceived, what I thought was love from somebody else, or whether it was the hit off of alcohol, drugs, or foodstuffs. I hadn't realized that they were all a desperate attempt to feel better because of how crap I felt on the inside. I knew I was somebody who was full of self-criticism, but I didn't at that point realize that it was that was causing my suffering. I was blaming the external world and desperately finding a solution in the external world. So one particular time I'd been desperately trying to make the relationship that I was in work. And I'm looking at it from the lens now, I can see that neither of us knew it was going to work. We both knew it wasn't going to work. But I was desperately trying to make it work, because walking away from another relationship to me meant that was my fault. And I was therefore, again, the unlovable person. And that was going to take me on a downward trajectory. And one particular time there was a group of us that had gone away to a festival. And we had got up very early, started drinking very early, started taking drugs very early, and had all set off to bar hop, basically, go on a pub crawl, listening to live music. And at one particular point, I don't quite, my time frame on this to where in the day this happened is off. But at some point, my recollection of it is that we were in a pub. My boyfriend at the time, in my view, was being friendly with somebody else within our group, but wasn't being friendly with me. So, of course, that triggered all of my insecurities. And I blew up in the middle of this pub, and then we went outside, and he and I were really massively arguing. Some of the other people were trying to join in. And by that point, I was too far gone on alcohol and drugs to be thinking clearly, and absolutely lost my mind. And stormed off. I was in the middle of a city that I didn't know where anything was. I don't really know how I found my way back to the campsite, but on the way, I stopped at a newsagent's and I bought as much alcohol as I could afford, and a heap of tablets. Went back and sat under a tree. All of our tents were kind of in one cluster. And I sat there, I remember looking at the tree, and it became quite cinematic, because it then started pouring of rain and I didn't have a jacket. I'd bought a notepad and a pen as well. And I sat looking at all these tents and had this thought that everyone that was there would be better off without me in their lives. And that in fact, everyone would be better off. The world would be better off without me in their lives. And I wouldn't be as miserable anymore. So I started to take the drugs. I started to take the alcohol, everything that I had on me. And whilst I was doing that, I was writing goodbye letters to family and friends, and started to, at some point, go and put these around the people that we were camping with, my friends. And as I was doing that, one of the friends came back, and something, coming to your senses there, that little nudge gave me I apologized to her. I apologized to her for my behavior at the pub, and recounted how worthless and idiotic I was, and that the world would be better off without me, blah, blah, blah. And she took me into her tent, and we sat, and I don't know for how long, conversed. And I downloaded everything that was going on for me that I'd never told anybody, really, not in that kind of a way. And I'd also told her what I'd done in relation to taking the drugs and the tablets. And we carried on talking for I don't know how long. And at some point she said, look, I'm pretty sure that you're going to be okay. So why don't we go to sleep and then we can sort all of this out in the morning? And I laid down and I remember thinking, hang on, I don't know that what I've taken actually is not going to impact me. So therefore, I don't want to go to sleep. Because actually, in that moment, the realization was, I don't want to die, but I don't want to live in the way that I've been living. And I don't know what to do about that, but I really don't want to die. So I woke my friend up and we secretively left the campsite and went to a local hospital where I got treated. They wanted to keep me in for observation for a few days, but I didn't want that. So came home and my friend was looking after me. And then we came home, I think it was the next day anyway. And I went to see a GP very soon after that to look for some support. But what I realized was that I didn't want to be miserable anymore, but equally I didn't want to die. And my question then became, and my quest then became, well, how can I find another way of living? Is there another way of living rather than in this turmoil of how the mantra that I had was that I was a fat, ugly, stupid, unlovable cow. That was the mantra that I had. It's no wonder now when I think about it, why I felt the way that I felt. But what I did in that moment was hang on to that there was something, there was that little nudge that said, no, now's not the time. And I wouldn't pinpoint it as being a voice in my head or the voice of God or something else. It was just something that said, not now, not now. You've got to find another way. And so from that point that's where really, whilst I'd been looking into sort of spiritual development very tentatively, that's when my personal journey, I think, really started. And that's why I wanted to share this as the first episode, because for many of us, it's when we hit that rock bottom point, and that rock bottom point can be in many guises. But often there's that moment of clarity of not now, or that moment of clarity of there's another way, look for another way. And even if we don't know how, even if we haven't got that direct step-by-step process, I think it's important for us all to recognize that if we've been given a pointer, a nudge, a shift, a moment of awareness to go, not this, then what's the that? If it's not this, then what that? And even if we haven't got an immediate answer, is to keep looking. So for me, from there, as I said, I went to spoke to my GP. My GP then put me on to counselling. Counselling wasn't a process that worked for me. I know it works for many people, but for me personally, it didn't work. I then looked in many different, started looking at many different support systems out there, many different processes, and was trialing them. And I'm sure all of them kind of turned that dial a little bit. But the thing that really clicked into place for me was coaching. Hence why I trained as a coach and then ended up running a business as a coach. That's not what I intended to do. That's a story for another episode. But it's about finding your way. And that's what I would suggest for anyone that's listening to this. If this has brought something to mind for yourself, that realization that that internal voice is not kind, it's actually quite abusive, that there is another way. It's not about, in my view, it's not about being positive. It's not about always having to do affirmations, but it's looking to challenge that thinking to see whether it's actually true. Is it helpful? Is it kind? Is it considerate? Is there actually any validity to it at all? And if the answer is no to any one of those, then that's your clue out, is to start looking for what is true, what is honest, what is kind. And if you don't know how to do that, then as I say, please find support. Now, that support could be in an informal way. It might be that you have got a family member or a friend that you can go to have a conversation. somebody that you can not necessarily look to them to find a way out, but through that clarifying of a problem. I'm sure you've heard of the phrase, a problem shared is a problem halved. The reason that phrase is there is because as we're articulating a problem, we're forced to clarify it more and more. And the more that we're forced to clarify it, actually, that's where we get rid of the stuff that actually, it's not that thing that's the problem, it's this thing. And we let go of more and more stuff. That's why the problem gets halved. It gets more to the nub through the talking process. So whether you do that with a friend or family member, make sure you're clarifying as much as possible what you need for them, whether you're looking for answers, direction, advice, or whether you simply want to somebody that you can share this with, even though it might be hard for them to hear. Make sure that they are capable and able, and you're in a space to be able to do that before you start. But equally, if you don't have somebody like that, then please do look for the formal processes. And that could be through listening to podcasts where people share content that can help and inspire you. But equally, it may be through finding a counselor, a coach, a mentor, some other support network, whether it's one-to-one, whether it's in a group, whether it's online, in person, whatever you can access from the point of what you need at that moment. Always look for that starting point. It may not be the forever process, but it's something to get you started. Look for free resources on YouTube, on websites. There's so much out there now that can make a difference for you. So take the time to do that for yourself. And if you want to reach out to me personally, then please do at jules@juleswyman.com. All of the links and the everything will be in the show notes. Because I recognize that whilst for me, I can easily share this story, it doesn't trigger anything for me now. And even sharing it seems weird to remember what that person back then at age 28, 29 went through, because I just don't really remember. It's not like doesn't seem like it's part of me anymore. I've been on such a intense journey since then that it doesn't seem like it's me that did that. It was kind of not me, but anyway. I'm very grateful that she went through that process. I'm very grateful to her that she hit that rock bottom and that she didn't follow through, because I'm grateful to still be here and have the opportunity to share this kind of information with you. So thank you for listening. Please do make sure that you reach out to whoever you can if you need support following this episode. Thank you for listening to Coming to Your Senses, because this is where a gentle nudge can sometimes help you experience more of yourself. And I look forward to meeting you on the next episode.